So 5 ways to win more sales pitches. Well, I think, folks, that if you got a sales pitch opportunity, it is a golden opportunity. And I use this phrase quite a lot, golden opportunity, but it really is because, you know, virtually all of the time when you're doing a pitch, you've been invited to do the pitch. It's not like you're knocking on someone's door and saying, "Oh, can I just come in and do a sales pitch to you?" No, you can't. So you've got a chance, and these are usually the things that we do sales pitches in. It might be to an existing client, and existing clients are great sources of new revenue. You might be pitching to a potential client, and therefore you might be one of 3 or 4 people pitching to that potential client. You could be going for a tender, and you might have to do a pitch for a tender. And by the way, when we talk about pitches, we're talking about in person or indeed on Zoom, as this webinar is this morning. You might be pitching to an investor to get more money to come into your business. Or you could be pitching to a management team or a board, depending on the size of your organization, to kind of sell them your idea. So they are great opportunities. And I describe them as time and money opportunities. And what I mean by that is that I think from a time point of view, if you put the time into practicing and preparing, you will get the rewards. And most of the people I see delivering sales pitches clearly don't put enough time into preparation and practice. And then they wonder why they didn't win the pitch. So that's a big message for you, for today. Right. So let's get on with these 5 ways in the next 18 and a bit minutes. Right. Number 1 is audience and outcome. So what do I mean by that? Well, audience are clearly the people you're pitching to. So who are you pitching to? It's really important to know that. So if you get a chance to pitch to somebody, find out who's going to be on the pitch. It might be an organization who invites you, but who's going to actually be there? Then you can do your research. You can get to know a little bit about people. Also, be sure that you know what they're expecting from you in terms of content and time in particular. There's nothing worse than if you don't agree the time and they're there, you're thinking you've got 30 minutes for your pitch. They think you've got 10, things like that. It happens because we don't do enough. So find out what they're expecting from you, what they want from you in your pitch. And if you don't know the answer to that, ask them. Okay, simply ask them. And then be clear about what you want the outcome to be of the pitch as well. So when you've finished it, what do you want to have happened? What do you want to happen next? And we'll look a bit more detail in that as we go. But it does mean if you identify the outcome, then when you're putting your pitch together, you can focus on achieving that outcome. And many people don't even think about that. They just think, "Oh, I've got a pitch to do, great." And they just assume that the whole outcome is always going to be, they're going to say yes to me. Well, that might not be the case. It might be the pitch might be the start of winning the business. So find out how that's all going to work. But when you do put your pitch together, in terms of your audience and the outcome, focus very much on your audience. You have to put it together for your audience, not for yourself. Too many pitches, the pitcher focuses on themselves and how great they are and all that stuff. We'll talk about that in a second, but focus on your audience and focus on the benefits that they're going to get from working with you. Because if I'm sitting listening to your pitch, I don't really care about all the bits behind the scene. All I care about is what difference it's going to make to me as a business if I say yes to your pitch. So that's really important. So that's number 1. Number 2 in my 5 ways for you is simply this: make it easy to say yes. Okay? And people, it's obvious that's what you want to happen, isn't it? So whatever your outcome is, you want people to say yes to. But how are you going to do that? And why do you need to do that? Well, the reason you need to do it is because buyers like to buy. So you need to let the buyer buy. So you need to deliver your pitch in a way that will let me buy it rather than me thinking you're selling it. And the way to do that is to get it right when you're doing your preparation. So things like, I always say to people, sketch it out. And that doesn't mean firing up a PowerPoint if you're going to use slides, or thinking, "Oh, it's all in my head." Okay. Please don't do that. Sketch it out. And the bigger, this is, you can see the picture here, sketching out on a whiteboard. I haven't got a whiteboard. I've got a flip chart. And I sketch all my pitches out on a flip chart. And then I just try and make sure that I then know what I'm talking about as well. Because the last thing you want to do if you're doing a pitch is turn up with big notes. Okay, because if anybody turns up to do a pitch and I see them with big notes, I think there's 2 things here. Well, at least 2 things. Number 1, They don't know what they're talking about, so they've got to refer to the notes. Well, that's not much good, is it? That's not going to put confidence in, for you I'm not going to be very confident thinking that you know what you're talking about. And secondly, if you've got big notes, you probably haven't practiced it because you don't know what, you're just checking how it's all going to work. Well, that's not much good either. I want to know that you've put a bit into this pitch before you even deliver it to me. So, make sure you don't use big notes. And then the other thing about your pitch sketch is it gives you a chance to check, does the pitch flow? And what I mean by that is it just feels naturally. It doesn't feel as though it's a slide, and then another random one, and then another random one. There is that kind of flow to it. And of course, one of the key things, if you're delivering a sales pitch, whether it's a 5-minute pitch, a 10-minute pitch, might even be a 20-minute pitch, who knows? It has to have momentum. And you ask yourself, has this pitch got momentum? And what I mean by that is sometimes it's easy to get an engaging start, but then are you still having engagement from your audience as the pitch goes on? Or is it beginning to wane? Are you beginning to lose your energy as the pitch goes on? So you have to get that bit right. And really, with momentum, the other key thing is it's going to be driven by what you've got in your pitch. And this is where it goes back to, what are the audience expecting? What do you want the outcome to be? Focus on those two things, and then be ready, folks, to be a ruthless editor. Because anybody can fill a 10-minute pitch, a 20-minute pitch, a 30-minute pitch. The people who fill them really well are the ones who are good at leaving stuff out. We never, it's very rare anyone says to me, "Oh, Trevor, I've got a 10-minute pitch. I can only fill 2 minutes." Doesn't happen. They're really good people. They know how to avoid what I call the kitchen sink approach, putting far too much stuff in the pitch. So be ruthless. Take stuff out. The best pitchers are really good at taking stuff out. They also know how to use slides. If you're going to use slides, then don't use them that look like this. Too many words or too much detail. So get ready, folks, to bin stuff. Okay. That's really, the key to success is knowing what to leave out most of the time. And when you do settle on your content, think about the choice that you're offering. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think if you've got a proposal for your service or your product and you're pitching it to someone, give them some choice. 3 choices seems to be the magic number. Why? Because as the buyer, I like to think I'm making a decision. And if you give me one thing to choose from, that's not much of a decision, is it? You're now saying to me, take it or leave it. If you've got 3 things on the table, it will make such a big difference. I learned this very early on in my sales career, about 100 years ago, when I was working on the Lincolnshire Echo in the advertising department. And I would go to my customers with 3 ideas for adverts, all very similar, but not the same. And they'd go, "Oh, I like this one, Trevor, but could I include that headline from that one in that one?" And as soon as they start talking like that, that's it. They've bought. So offer a choice. It will be transformational if you're not doing it at the moment. And then, of course, be ready when you're doing your preparation that you've got some data. Because chances are people need data these days, don't they? And you see this on Dragon's Den, don't you, where they don't know the data, okay? And, that's made for telly, obviously, but it's clearly important that you know the numbers. So if you're talking about anything to do with numbers, finance, whatever it might be, you've got to be on top of your numbers. Because if you were pitching to me and numbers came into it, I'd be interrogating you about those numbers to make sure you understood what was going on. So there's no excuses for not knowing the numbers. And finally, in terms of, your preparation bit, think about this. Get your best bits in early. People say, I've seen people do pitches and they say, and I say, what? That bit you did at the end, that was fantastic. But why did you leave it till the end? Oh, well, that's the last thing they're going to hear and all that stuff. Yes, but by the time you got to the end of your pitch, most of your audience was switched off because the rest of it wasn't very interesting. And you've saved the best bit until they're not, they've already written you off. It's too late. So if you've got something really great to tell, get it in early. And finally, when you're thinking about, this preparation bit, think about the terminology. How are you going to answer this question? Because everybody's going to ask this. How much? It's an inevitable part of the pitch. So what are you going to do? What terminology are you going to use here? And this is something you might want to possibly think about a screenshot of. But I think there are 5 terms that often get used in these scenarios. Oh, it's my fee. Oh, my price is, the cost to you is, My rate is, your investment is. The one that I think really is the one to go down on this, ladies and gentlemen, and I've been trying to bang this drum for a long time, is this one. Okay? It's the one that's just come up in different color. The investment. It's your fee. It's your price. It's the customer's cost. And cost sounds like something I'd rather avoid. Thank you very much. Your rate. Or it's the customer's investment. So if I ever do a pitch and they ask me how much, I say, well, your investment in having, this session with me for this amount of time, this is what you'll get. The benefits will be, and then I explain how much it's going, that the answer to that how much question. So use that term investment, put it in your written proposals as well. It will make a difference because it's more about, it makes me feel as though it's justified then in saying yes to your idea. Oh, by the way, if you are ever going to, be also ready, just in case someone, when you're having that conversation about how much a negotiation comes along, think about how you're going to deal with that. I'm not going to do that. I do a whole separate session on negotiations, but I'm not going to touch that. But just be ready in case that happens. And finally, and I've mentioned this already, when you're ready, when you finally got it all together, take your practice seriously. Practice out loud. Practice in a public place. Okay, don't just go, oh, I'll skim through the slides. That's great, gone. Okay, time it, practice it. Make sure you really, really nail it. It will make a difference. Right, number 3, tell them what's coming up. And that means arrive early. So you've got plenty of time when you get there, whether virtually or in person. You've got time to do a bit of meeting and greeting because you might not know these people. And if you meet and greet them, that'll make you feel more comfortable. But when you do start your pitch, do not put a slide up that looks like an agenda. All right. Please don't do this. All right. Because people think agenda, meetings. It's going to run on too long. It's going to be too boring. So don't do that. Nor start your pitch with a drum banging. Hey, well, thanks for inviting me. It's a bloody good job you did because now I can tell you how great I am and all the fantastic things we do and the awards we've won. Don't do that. They know who you are. That's why you're even being invited to pitch. And don't ramble at the start either. What a lovely day. Well, that coffee was lovely. Thank you very much for that. Lovely to see you all here. Oh, get rid of all that nonsense, Get into your pitch and start your pitch by explaining what is going to happen. But explain it. Don't put it on a slide. Explain it. And the things you need to explain are these. You need to explain that you're there to share an idea, whether that's for a service or a product. You're going to explain to the audience how it's going to help them. You remind them how long you're going to be pitching for and how the Q&A works and what the next steps are. So that is how, and you speak all that, okay? And then you can get going. So you can then explain your idea. And then make sure, of course, when you do explain your idea, you put some passion into your delivery, all right? Because if you go, hey, this is my great idea, folks, you're going to love this. Oh, God, come on, use your voice, use your passion, because you know your stuff. You're passionate about it. And occasionally, if it works for you, keep checking in during the pitch. And the way I do this is to simply say things like, so what are you thinking right now? Are you envisaging using this? Can you see any problems with it? Whatever feels comfortable. You're just checking in. It's a way of interacting with your audience, keeping them interested. And you can do that whether you're doing it online or virtually, because you're ultimately trying to get people to, hey, this is a good idea, because it's very unusual. People go, this is a crap idea. And then when you get to the end of your pitch, just do a summary. Just do that little summary about what you've covered and all the best bits about it. And by the way, if you're pitching as a team, which sometimes happens, then, make sure you're organized. You need seamless handovers, and especially when you're doing it virtually. You don't want to go, all right, so I think Frank's going to come in now. You ready, Frank? Oh, God, come on. We can be better than that. And if you're as part of a team and you're not actually doing your part of the pitch, make sure you look engaged, all right? Because if you're looking like this, people will think, oh, well, they don't care, so why should I? Right, number 4 of my 5 ways for you is the Q&A management. Now, a Q&A could often make the difference between winning the pitch and losing the pitch. So be ready. And this is something most people completely don't even consider when they're putting a sales pitch together. Usually there's a Q&A. So check, does the time that you're pitching, the 20 minutes, does that include a Q&A? Or will there be 10 minutes at the end? It's usually at the end, separate. So if it's going to be at the end and separate, you can manage it much easier. So the first thing to think about is, what questions would you ask if you were the audience? Because then you can start to prepare the answers, start to think ahead, start to second guess. This is a bit like negotiating skills, always second guessing what the other people are going to be saying. And you can also have a couple there for rhetorical questions up your sleeve. So if there's a bit of a lull at the start of the Q&A, which is highly unlikely in a pitching situation, you can always say, well, the question I was expecting you to ask me is, and pick something in the pitch that you can re-talk about. And when you do get a question, do this. All right. People are terrible at this. Keep the answer brief, particularly for the first question, because people get asked a question, they get carried away. They spend 5 minutes answering the first question, which usually isn't a very good question. And suddenly there's no time left for the best questions. And don't ever be afraid to say this: I don't know. Okay. So make sure that you can do all that. Right. Finally, number 5. And this is really, really important. And I was working with someone on this on a one-to-one coaching call yesterday. You've got to agree the next steps. So you've done the pitch, okay? And what often happens is you go through the Q&A and you say, oh, thanks very much, everybody. That's great. I'll be in touch. Or you might leave it, and say, well, I'll drop you an email in the next few days, or I'll give you a call sometime next week. Okay, we need to be more precise with our next steps. So you need to agree the follow-up. This is really important. You need to agree. You need to say to people, so how do you want me to follow up with you? What is the best way of following up with you? And when should I do that? And ideally, it's on the phone. It's not email. Email is not a great way of following up. Now, you might need to send an email proposal out, and I've got that coming up on the next slide. But following up, try and make sure it's on the phone, okay? Because you can ask questions, you can find out where people are. Email conversations aren't great. People ignore emails. The number of people who say to me, oh, I sent the pitch out, Trevor, I haven't heard from them ever again. Okay? Because they don't, because people ignore emails. It's very easy to ignore emails. So quick, these are the things you might want to take screenshots of. They're not going to be on the screen very long, but these are the things if you put in a written proposal together at the end of your pitch, do it like this. So it's about them, not you. Keep it succinct, and that means not 10 pages about you at the start. God, when I've been working with organizations on a consultancy basis, and we've tendered out for a new website, and you get web developers, and I'm not picking on web developers, I don't know who's in here today, but they tend to send the first 10 pages is all about them, and it's all the same all the time. Okay, so cut all that nonsense out. Okay, print it out and post it as well, because that'll get noticed. And then make sure, you focus on the benefits. You've got that choice in there, the problems your offers or service is going to solve, the timing, investment, and also the logistics. So there's everything in there. And think about sending it with a video introduction. All right. Because most people don't. In fact, people rarely do, but it's easy to do. So just do a video introduction and say, oh, thanks very much for inviting me to the pitch. Attached is blah, 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 blah. And as agreed, I'm going to give you a call next Thursday at 3:00, whatever that might be. And when you do follow up, always add a little bit more value. And what I mean by that is you can say things like, well, since I did the pitch, I've had a quick think about this. And I think one thing we might be able to do better for you than I suggested at the time is this. So add a little bit more value. Give me another reason for saying yes. So there you go, folks. Let me summarize what we've just talked about, the 5 ways. So number 1 was audience and outcome. What are they expecting? Who are they going to be? What are you trying to achieve? Number 2, make it easy to say yes. When you practice your presentation, go, is it easy to say yes to this? Or is it too complicated? Is there too much jargon? Number 3, tell them what's coming up at the start of your pitch, but don't put it on a slide. Just speak it. All right. Number 4 is be ready for the Q&A management, because most sales pitches, they forget about this. Find out how it's going to work, agree how it's going to work, and then agree those next steps. Okay. So that's really, really important. So there we go. Almost my 20 minutes up. And finally, I would say to you, when you go out there and do your pitch, then make sure you get out there and you feel as though, well, you go out and enjoy it. You look forward to it. God, it is this golden opportunity, isn't it? Because if you enjoy delivering your pitch in the same way I've enjoyed delivering this webinar to you over the last 19 minutes or so, then your audience will respond better to you. If they've had an enjoyable experience, you've had an enjoyable experience, that's going to help them say yes to you. Now, what I always advise, if you've come on this webinar, you're clearly here to learn something, okay? And that's a great thing to do, because in business, we have to keep on learning. So if you want to learn more about pitching and presenting, then I've got this podcast. It's the one in the middle. If you want to learn about running or cricket, then they're the other two to look at. But the one in the middle, I'm very lucky. I've been doing it for 6.5 years, nearly 7 years in February. And I get some amazing guests on from around the globe who share some fantastic stuff about pitching, presenting, speaking, all that sort of stuff. And I've got a couple of books out there. I've just taken delivery of a whole new set of the 7 Steps to Successful Presentation books. And every book I sell, the net proceeds, which is usually £5 per book, I give then to the Children's Hospice Southwest. If you want if you want to buy a copy of the book, you can buy it from me direct. It's a little bit cheaper than on Amazon, and the hospice still get the same amount of money.